All right, this video, it is with Justin Hollandsworth. If you don't know Justin, he's been on Whitetail Cribs. He's been a guest of the Exodus podcast, the land podcast, and is a part of Whitetail Addictions. You can watch some of his hunts in the past. But this episode, we're talking about so many important things for making the most out of the first half of October, how to become more efficient, and how to utilize that time of season to fill your tag. I hope you guys enjoy this. Let's get right into it. Here we go. Justin, how's it going?
Good. It's going really good. I'm finally hunting. That's it feels good to be back in the woods again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, where are you at right now?
Kentucky.
So you headed down there for one of the earliest openings of the year and chasing some whitetails.
Yeah, we got down here about 2 days prior to season starting and did a lot of glassing, stuck out a lot of cameras, and just tried to locate some stuff. And as of right now, we haven't had much luck, but it's been 95 to 100 degrees almost every single day. But a big front came in and got a bunch of rain, and today, as of right now, it's 76. So that's a huge difference from what we were dealing with before. I drug Andre down here from Iowa, and
Is he melted? Is he melting down there?
He's melting, and he's used to the Iowa deer and not this situation. It's been so he hasn't gone out of state in probably 15 years or so.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that. Dang.
Yeah.
That's how's he liking it down there so far? I mean, I know the weather's been crappy.
The weather's just that's kind of killed the mood. I think when we started, we were guns a-blazing. And we got access to quite a few farms down here. And then him and I both, we've actually knocked on some doors and got permission on 2 other farms since we've been down here too. Mm-hmm. And just, trying to find something to hunt. And when it's 95 and 100 degrees,
not much movement, I assume.
No, and there is giant cornfields everywhere, and the deer in the corn, and there's hardly any acorns down here. Mm-hmm. The other night when we got that storm, I did a little speed scouting on my e-bike yesterday, and just hugging some perimeters and stuff like that. And that storm blew a bunch of acorns down, is what I noticed. And then I also found a couple places too. I found a couple persimmon trees, and the persimmons were on the ground too. So that's my plan B as of right now. But I found a really it took me. I had to go up and just. I didn't hunt at all this morning. All I did was I glassed until about 9, mm-hmm. And then one of the woodlots that I was hunting is driving me crazy because I know there's a good buck in the area, and there's 3 or 4 other little woodlots over there, and I'm running out of time. Mm-hmm. So I went into every woodlot except for where I was going to hunt this evening, and I just blew every single deer out of every one of them. And I tried to stack them into that woodlot that I want to hunt tonight. And upon my stacking, there's a fence row that runs between 2 cornfields that separates the woodlot that I want to be in and one of the other woodlots. And I cut a huge track. I mean, it's just it rained last night, and there are so many tracks along that fence row over there. So and I was just like standing there, like kind of checking everything out, looking at the tracks, and I was looking for a tree right there. And about that time, a big, heavy-footed, you could just hear it in his run, just blasted through the corn. And I'm like, okay, this is where he's at. So I jumped on my e-bike and went back to the truck, grabbed my stand, and I got it all hung and trimmed out and ready for this evening. So I'm going to hunt it tonight and tomorrow. I'll have the wind for the next couple days. He's bound to come back. I gotta spend 2 or 3 sets in there at least.
Mm-hmm. Are you gonna hunt that spot in the morning, or is it primarily hunting evenings right now, glassing in the mornings?
With it being corn like that on both sides, I think I can get in there in the morning too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a ton of more cover, not like an open alfalfa field or something.
Yeah, I think there's a little waterway that kind of leads up to that spot there, so I can ride my bike pretty much right in there. I should have the wind the whole time, and I don't know. I'm gonna try it. Mm-hmm. I'm not big on hunting mornings this time of the year, but when you only got so many days to hunt,
yeah,
and you're out of state, you just gotta try some stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully, when this goes live, we'll know how the rest of your trip went. So, well, this is kind of a good prelude to what may happen here. But, yeah. So, what I really want to cover here today is you really enjoy hunting early October, and I just kind of want to break down your entire early October strategy and some things that you've done right, some things that you've improved over the years. But before we get too far into this, you've been on this podcast a handful of times, Whitetail Cribs. But for people who maybe aren't familiar with who you are, just give a Cliff Notes version of who you are.
Justin Hollandsworth. I live in Ohio. Kind of hunt 4 or 5 different counties in the state. But then I also do some traveling. Like right now I'm in Kentucky, doing some early, bow hunting. I usually do some hunting in Illinois, if I can draw an Iowa tag. I've done, my fair share of hunting in Kansas, and it's just, I've been involved with Lone Wolf for close to 20 years now.
Wow. How'd you initially get involved with that?
Years ago, bought a stand from Andre at a show, and we just kind of hit it off. And I was super hungry for knowledge to get better, which now you have all these podcasts. I would have died to have this back in the day. We just hit it off and just stayed in contact, and then and kind of took it from there. And then he over the years, it just helped me with a lot of different things that I was trying to learn at that that moment in time, or I'd tell him about a situation and he'd run something past me. Well, what about this? What if you did this? This is what my experience. And we would, and just, now over the years, we just, build up a friendship, and it's, it's been a one of the best friendships I've ever had. And it's, when you can share the woods with him, just like this week being down here and scouting, and just the conversations and the different things that we're looking at and talking about, or, he's talking about, this is where I would hunt this spot, and this is the tree, and, whatever. And this is what the thermals are going to do, and breaking down everything. I'm very fortunate with that, because it's definitely helped me. But there's some things too that I do that he doesn't, and vice versa, So, you take a little bit from everybody. That's the good thing about these podcasts that are out there now. Like, I don't care how much success you got. You got to be willing to listen and soak in something that, and just try it,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think it is pretty amazing, and I think everyone should be really grateful for the amount of information that's out there. And the cool thing about the podcast as well is you can, if you live in Pennsylvania, you can find someone that's getting it done in Pennsylvania. If you live in Kentucky or Illinois or Iowa, or maybe take some things that people are finding success in other states and think, how would that apply to the terrain I'm hunting? And there's just a lot of value out there for sure.
for sure.
Yeah. So October, I think it seems people either love it or hate it. And I'm talking about the first part of October. And obviously you're in the category of you love it. So
Yep.
why have you always loved early October, or is that something that you
No.
developed a skill set? So, okay. So tell me a little bit about your love hate or maybe love relationship with October.
So I would go, like, years ago, I would just go, as soon as they rang the bell and you could go and hunt. I mean, I would just go all out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there for a long time, I think not only did I take a lot of opportunities away from myself, but just because I didn't know what I was doing, but I didn't understand the value behind timing the hunt, and being able to move in on on information once as things kind of develop. I think for a long time, um, it was you're reading a sign and and you're getting pictures of a particular deer or whatever, and you're so eager just to get in there. Um, the timing of a early season hunt is, and being patient enough to set back and let some things kind of happen. I think that's one of the biggest keys to it. Has been my experience with it.
So initially you feel probably just too aggressive, like blindly aggressive.
Yep. Yeah. I would just, because I just wanted to hunt,
Mm-hmm.
so it was, and I would hunt spots and deer that just weren't quite ready to be hunted yet. And
Hey, what do you mean by that? And I have an idea what you mean, but just for everyone listening.
so, you know, it's one thing to spot a big deer on a piece of ground in the beans in the summer, and now you're watching him and now he's out of velvet or whatever it might be, and season's getting closer, and 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 then they go through that whole change, which I think that's a lot. That's what's going on right now. You see there's a lot of bucks coming out of velvet. There's still some holding, but there's still, I'd say 50 from my cameras, 50% are out of velvet right now,
Okay.
if I had to guess.
And it's September 7th for reference.
Yes, and they, I don't, I think they go through this. I think they go through a weird change at this time. I think they're almost like lethargic, almost, and then there's that 2 or 3 day span when they lose their velvet, where they just kind of go underground, like all of a sudden they're just gone, and then they'll reappear. But I think the big thing is being able to stack a lot of things in your favor. um Maybe you're glassing, I can't emphasize using a spotting scope and binoculars as much as possible. I mean, a camera can only, I love trail cameras.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the best tools. Obviously, you guys are in the business,
Mm-hmm.
and it is one of the best tools that I think has ever came out. There's been so much stuff that you can learn from a camera. Um, and whether you like cell cams or you don't, you can also learn a lot, because from a cell cam, you're constantly getting that instant information. And for me personally, when I get a picture of a deer on a cell cam or something like that, I like to take and look at, okay, what's the weather doing? What's the What's the pressure like outside? What's the all the conditions, weather,
Wind direction.
what's the wind doing? Why did he show up over there? Like, you can instantly do that. Where if you pull an SD card, we all tend to just go like this through those pictures, and then we go save as and just dump it, right?
Yep.
And sometimes we don't take it all in, and I think sometimes that's where the cell cam and if you think that you're going to get a picture of a deer on a cell cam and instantly go in there and then kill the deer, well, you're mistaken. That's it. That's not true. Trust me, I've done it. It's not. I've screwed that up enough times to tell you that those cell cams don't 100% kill the deer. There's no way. But being able to stack a lot of different things into your favor, because an early season hunt, you want it to be a 1 to 2 times strike. The first time in is the best time in. I mean, that's been said a million times. But you want to kind of take a lot of different things in consideration, and just be patient enough to stay out until you see the time is right. And I don't think a trail camera is going to give you that information like a spotting scope and binoculars will. That is going to give you, there's nothing better to me than to treat an early season bow hunt like a turkey hunt. I treat it like.
What do you mean by that?
I put him to bed. I just seen him. I just put him to bed. Tonight I make my move and slide in that general area where I think he's going to come out. That's probably been the most helpful thing for me, as far as like, I just remember when I first started turkey hunting, and I'm good friends with a guy that he's just ate up with turkey hunting. He likes it more than anything. That's his thing. So when I first started turkey hunting, it was mostly with him, and that was always the thing, is to go out in the evenings, and we would put these birds to roost. Then the next morning we would go in, and it was like taking candy from a baby, And I started to think about that. I was like, well, why couldn't you do that with a whitetail? If you could. I don't like I'm not big on hunting mornings early season, just because 9 times out of 10, it just seems like you're going to cross paths with them. And then, once they know that they're being hunted, like, it is just a complete different ball game. So I prefer to set back in the morning, glass him, do something, then take my set. And this is why it's just so critical to be mobile, because you could hang those preset stands in those known spots. Like, maybe it's a known rut spot, or maybe it's over like a food plot or something like that you have. But it's so funny. I have those sets on places I hunt. 9 times out of 10, I still kill a deer out of a stand that I just hung.
Right. Yeah. So the question asked there is it even worthwhile going through in the summer and, let's say, August, September, hanging fresh sets when in reality, most times it's going to be a fresh set that you end up killing the deer you're after?
I think it just depends. I mean, it just depends on the situation. I think there's times that, well, for example, like my farm, I haven't spent, I bought it last year, had it for the first season last year. I never hunted it once. There was never a deer that I was interested enough. I was after another a particular buck, and that was just, and he wasn't on that farm. So, but this past summer, I thought, well, I'm going to go, in that situation, I'm kind of designing that farm to hunt the way that I want it to.
Mm-hmm.
So I hung some sets according to how I was putting things together. Now, I have not hunted out of any of those stands that I hung.
Mm-hmm.
They're there. They're there to tweak later
Mm-hmm.
as you start to hunt and say, this one's off a little bit, or this one's not going to work at all due to access or whatever. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't, you know, I don't think it is. I think the preset stands in the summer. Prime example, Heath and I had this piece that we hunt in Illinois. You know how many times we went out there in the summer, hung stands, when we never hunted out of any of them?
A lot, I assume,
Uh,
most times.
9 times out of, yeah, again, 9 times out of 10, we
Yeah.
never hunted out. And so now we have 0 stands on those farms. I'm like, this is stupid. We hung all these sets. I'm like, we don't even hunt out of them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so we just pulled them off.
So just 100% hunting off of most recent information and scouting. And
Yeah.
I think it is funny because I'm not nearly as mobile as you guys, and I would never claim to be. But it is funny as you get throughout the season, you start looking of the stands you pre-hung, how often you hunt them versus hanging something fresh because of some new information that you found in season. So beyond the debate of hanging pre-hung sets or just kind of hunting off most recent information, which you guys find a lot of success doing that, and clearly it's out of necessity. How was that something that took some time to develop too, or was that something that you were like, I have to hung my pre-hung sets because I already have them ready, and then once you did that, you didn't have success? You're like, okay, I need to do something different, or have you always been more mobile just out of necessity?
Probably more so out of laziness,
Hmm.
of like just wanting to have my stuff. Well, and then there's part of it too that you just think that, well, that way they're in there, they're hung, everything's trimmed out, you're good to go, and you can jump right in, and um and it, and you almost treat it as a virgin set, which,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. Um, but the problem with bow hunting is you could be, if you're 10 yards off the mark, then you might as well be a million miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the problem I always kind of got into, was I would have those presets and say the deer was 20 yards too far out that night when it came through. Well, that was my shot. That was my opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And now, say it's, you know, say it's the morning, and now I got to get out of there, which I don't hunt hardly any mornings, with, during early season.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if the situation's right, I definitely will. I never rule out really anything with whitetails because you really can't.
I feel like you get in trouble when you start living in absolutes in the world of whitetails.
Yeah, I mean, every animal is so different, and every one of them's got, like, just different things that make them tick.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you just got to find their quirk and um, try to find that one little thing that they do that you can capitalize on and make it count. But um, and the other problem with that is too. Okay, say you hunt an evening. Now the deer's, say, 20 yards too far out. Now you got to get down and get out of there,
Mm-hmm.
and get out of there clean.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, oh, that is, I hate that. That is such a frustrating thing, because a friend of mine, actually, Joe Rundy, used to be part of Whitetail Addictions, lived up in Wisconsin. He actually lives out in Montana. Years ago, he said this to me. He said, you should take a trail camera and stick it on a tree when you get down from it for the evening. And I said, why is that? He goes, because, I always wondered like how things drastically change. And he said he took a trail camera one time, stuck it on a tree that he hunted, got down, and then he came back the next day, didn't see the deer, but then he checked it, and then the deer came in and tracked him at night.
Yep.
And so I was hunting a huge 9-point. This is probably like 2007, 2008 ish. And he had said that to me, and I went in, hunted the deer, seen him that night, and he was a Boone and Crockett 9-point. He was
Wow.
huge frame, and still one of the biggest frame deer I've ever seen. And I put that camera on that tree, and it was amazing because when he did finally cut my track, he tracked me right to that tree. And I just thought, geez, I'm like, and you could tell right away too, because then a deer that I was seeing, especially when I was glassing, and then when I moved in and I hunted him, I seen him, and then I hunted him again, seen him. That was the night that I put the trail camera on the tree, and then he tracked me, and then it was like I wasn't seeing him at all.
Wow.
It was like it just some deer are just way more sensitive, and he definitely was that. And so if you're 20 yards off the mark, I mean, you could have just possibly cost yourself a shot at that deer.
Yeah. That's why it's so hard. I mean, so when you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants and you're hanging sets and you are trying to find the trail or the shot, it's not pre-trimmed. What does that process look like? I mean, are you betting on the faint trail, the more defined trail? And I understand it's so dependent, but is there any rules of thumb when you're trying to figure out how to hang and hunt and find the spot? X marks the spot. How do you find the X?
Those tracks, I mean, being able to identify that track. Sorry, this dang thing. I get this. Identifying that track is huge, because that's going to dictate where you see him coming and going, probably the most. And if you can use cameras in that spot, sometimes they're a little touchy with cameras too, so you got to be careful with that. But what I like to do is I like to try to have something that accesses everything. I mean, if he's got an advantage point to where you're coming and going, I mean, that's going to really screw up some things. So you got to, first of all, you got to look for, okay, here's the access, here's roughly where I can get to get to those, that general area where maybe he's coming and going. And then from there, I like to think about, okay, what kind of wind is he going to like to come in? If it's a situation where it's thick through that timber and stuff like that, then he's probably going to use, some kind of wind that kind of splits the difference. But I've also seen where it's open and they're going to cut. He's going to use the wind at his back and come out, because he's going to watch. So as he comes through, so then you got to play that into the situation. So it's, number one, you have to figure out where he's coming and going. Two, two's the access. And sometimes, depending on the situation, you might not be able to get to that deer, just because the access is just so crappy. And then from there, I mean, if I got those two things figured out, then it's, what's he feeding on? And, then trying to come up with a pattern, because early season's it's all about a pattern. That's why, to me personally, like, I enjoy it so much more. It's not, the rut's crazy.
It's random. Yeah,
It's
it can be
so
random.
random.
Yeah.
And sometimes some deer that I have, um, they historically, just based off of some trail camera pictures and stuff over the years, come late October or early November, all of a sudden they're not on me anymore, and they might not be back till, November 15th to somewhere in around Thanksgiving. They might show back up or something like that. And I don't like playing those odds because those odds don't favor me.
Right.
Those odds favor the other guys out there hunting.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why, to me, that's why you just got to strike. If I got a big deer on a piece that I have access to, and he's laying all the cards out there, then I'm going to strike early every time.
So let's just say most states open October 1. I know you guys open a little bit sooner than that, but from October 1 to October 15th, if you had to break down the amount of sits versus the amount of observation sits, what does that look like? Just to quantify so people get an idea.
It just depends. I mean, if you're going into, the 2 weeks going into season, I will try to be behind glass every night. I'll go out and I do quite a bit of, scouting, in the summer and, watching the bucks and velvet and stuff like that. More so just because I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And, but 2 weeks leading into season, if he's coming out to like a spot where it's pretty easy to glass and it's beans or something like that, I will go over there every single evening for the 2 weeks prior, leading into season. And that's what I did last year on that buck that I killed. But opening day, I couldn't hunt because the wind wasn't right. So I glassed the morning and evening and then made my move the following evening and got the deer. I had the deer at like 32 yards that night, and the wind just switched on me, and he got a big whiff of me, but I was at full draw. I mean, I had him beat. I just needed 2 more steps, and but that was all the glassing leading up to that moment.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that most people miss. And when we recorded with Steve Pinkston not long ago too, and it's that same thought process of a lot of guys. October 1 comes and they're just now kind of starting, but you have a 2-week head start. As soon as the bell rings, you're going at full speed versus the slow increase of figuring things out from October 1. And then October, a lot of things change throughout that month too. So I feel if you don't strike in the first 2 weeks, so much is going to change for the rest of the year or for the next 40 days.
For sure. I mean, and I'll say this, I don't know of anybody that glasses more than Steve does.
I believe that.
He's behind the glass more than any person that I know. But that's look at his wall. I mean, it's that's he's put all that to use over the years, and typically he's shooting his buck in October. Mm-hmm. 9 times out of 10, he's got his buck down at home in October, and it's because of the glass. People don't they rely way too much on trail cameras, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't done that, because that would be a complete lie, because I still find myself sometimes doing it. I've been even down here right now on this trip, a little bit of like, oh, we're not getting anything on camera and blah, 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 and this and that. And then you just go out and you get your boots on the ground, just like I did today, and got in there. And then all of a sudden as I went along, it looked better and better and better. And sometimes you think, man, I shouldn't go any farther. I'd rather just know. I would almost rather just bump the deer and then go, oh, now I get it. Like today, like light bulb went off. I was like, why didn't I do this before? I would have been in the chips instead of spending, you know, all these days just jacking around
Guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll do a couple rapid fire here. What is your favorite food source that first half of October that you've found the most success with?
Um, favorite is acorns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you get you get those fresh acorns, they'll bypass everything to get to those acorns.
Mm-hmm. So, what's number 2?
Any fruit,
Okay.
any
So,
kind of fruit.
apples, persimmons, pears.
Yep, that's man, they are just all over that. I mean, I kind of find pears to be. Well, we don't have a lot of persimmons up there where I live.
Mm-hmm.
I planted a bunch just this past year and stuff like that, but so I can't speak a lot on that. But pears seem to be a little more attractive than apples, but yeah, fruit.
What's number 3? We're just gonna work down this. We're gonna work down the first half of October food sources.
Green beans. If you got a bean field that's still green, going in the season, look for, you know, the side of that field that's shadowed in the evening, and also look for the low spot in that field. If you can find a low, spot that is shadowed in an evening, it's money. And here's this is just my theory on it. I believe that, when these farmers, when they farm, they're out there fertilizing these fields, and I think a lot of fertilizer runs down, and the those plants that are in that low spot have more nutrients than any of the other plants in the field. And then 2, with it being warm early season, they like to come out in those shaded spots in those low areas like that, and just stay in the shade, and just to not be, not to get so hot, because now they're putting their winter coats on, and they're getting overheated. And then here's the tough part though. So now you're trying to hunt that low spot.
I was
And
gonna say, yeah.
When do you want to hunt it?
In the evenings. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you have to figure out which side of that you want to be on, or you want to, maybe you want to go, maybe it's across the field a little bit that you want to go, or maybe it's, maybe you got a creek behind you. Maybe the deer are dumping out. Onto your right side. They're coming across the creek. I say this because I just hunted a situation like this.
Okay.
What these deer were doing, they were coming out of this bedding area, and there was 3 big runs. Then they were coming across this creek, and then hitting this one trail that dumped into this low spot on the shaded side of these beans. Well, and then what was happening, the creek was running behind me and down.
Mm-hmm.
So my thermals were dropping, and due to the water moving, the water was pulling my scent down the stream.
Mm-hmm.
And it was bulletproof. I had plenty of deer across that and never got busted.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't see the right deer. But and that's where they all wanted to go. So yeah, that would beans in that situation, I guess.
Where does Clover fall? We're at, I think, number 3 now. Is that number 4?
I would put clover in there. I'd put clover right in there with beans. Yeah. but I would go 4. Yeah, I'd probably go. And I plant a lot of clover. But sometimes, like today, just scouting, and it was just a hayfield, but there was a ton of clover in it. So it was like, you know what? Don't overlook it. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, and so, but acorns are hands down like that.
The king of the crops there.
Yeah, when they first start dropping those first 2-3 weeks or whatever season, like, sometimes that can get a little frustrating too, because you're like, God, I wish these would quit dropping,
So
because
it get a little bit more predictable, because I mean, it's super unpredictable at that point, or hard to hunt.
for sure. And then sometimes you got certain trees that, like, the year before, on a, say it's a piece that you hunt all the time, and on the year before it was like they were just dumping in there off that particular tree. Then you walk into the next year and they're like, there's not one acorn in the whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
So
Interesting. Okay. So those are the key things. So what about, as far as, are you a barometric? I know you're a moon guy too, but as far
mhm.
as some other key things, because you're talking about being patient and being precise, but still being aggressive. So I mean, when you're trying to figure out how to put all the cards on the table to make a move, how much of a play does it barometric pressure or the moon phase or the temperature play into versus just general pattern?
um I, I guess I probably don't pay as much attention to the pressure thing. Um, I know you listen to Mark Drury, and boy, he's real big on it,
Uh huh.
and 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 he's got it down. He's wicked smart with that stuff, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. And I probably should get more dialed in, with that. Um, I will. A lot of times it's like I'm probably paying more attention, back to my point with the cell cams, of getting the instant pictures, and then being able to take a look right there at that moment in time. I got a little, like, notepad that I'll have, like, in my truck or at home, or at work or whatever, and I'll pull it out, and, like, if it's a particular deer, I'll write this stuff down,
Mm-hmm.
just to try to, just to form some kind of, pattern. That's the biggest thing that I'm trying to do. And sometimes there is no pattern. Sometimes it's like, okay, none of this makes sense. The deer,
Right.
he's just
Super
doing
random.
what he does.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't know if I answered your question or not. I think
I
I
mean, in essence, as far as like temperature drops, everyone gets excited with the temperature drop. You just had one in Kentucky. I think you
yeah,
probably have more pep to your step here now. I mean, is that something that, because I mean, when you really look at the season, 2 weeks from October 1 to October 15th, it's a relatively short period of time. I mean, it can fly by really fast
yeah,
if you're not methodical. So I mean, are you, for instance, okay, we just had a 10-degree temperature drop. I think I know the general area this deer is bedded. I think I know where he's feeding. Are you going in to be pretty aggressive on one of those high value sits in a short period of time? Or if we're just talking about this period of season?
for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Uh, I tell you what, I've killed a lot of bucks early season on the first cold front, of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, boy, that could be just so deadly. Um, just even, like, now, like we were talking earlier, it's been 95 to 100 degrees here every day. It's just been miserable. And, like,
Mm-hmm.
today it's 76 out. And I got a feeling that the movement's going to be really good tonight, just because, they're going to be, you know, Keith has talked about this for years, like, it's like people, with the weather, you take a 95 to 100-degree day. I mean, how much time do you want to really spend outside moving around a lot?
Most people, none. They're going to wait for it to cool off. That yard
Yes.
work they're waiting to do.
I got a feeling, I think you're going to get some nighttime movement. I think you're going to get, um, I think you're just going to get them just laying in their beds, and just trying to stay cool, and not, you know, use a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to think too, when you're hot like that. I mean, I'm not an animal, but me personally, like, when it's really hot out, I don't want to eat a lot,
Mm-hmm.
um, I, sometimes sometimes I could go almost the whole day and just eat dinner kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, you know, and, I think whitetails are a lot like that. I think they just they don't feel the need to eat that much. But now that it's cooled down, being early season, I got a feeling that those bucks are going to want to eat like crazy, because the other thing that they're trying to do is they're trying to pack on those pounds for, what they have coming up in November. They
Mm-hmm.
want to be, they want to be able to hold that body weight, as they make their, 30-day dash of, breeding.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what about this scenario? Someone's going to run two different scenarios. So the first one being there's a buck that they've had on camera throughout the summer. They've got some pictures in September. Maybe the last picture they got was September 28th or September 29th or something like that. Season's about to open for them. And they've been getting pictures. Let's say shooting time is 6:30, and they've been getting pictures of them at like 7:15. And then, so it's past gray light for sure at that point. I mean, it's 40 minutes after, let's say. What does that information tell you? Are you hoping that the cold front gets them moving up sooner and that's when you're going to wait to strike? Or are you thinking, man, he's kind of close, kind of not close. I think I'm going to go ahead and test it. Like in that scenario, what are you doing?
Um,
Because
I,
he's not
I
super, super paternable. Like he's just kind of, you feel like you're on the fringe. It's a small parcel. And it's just like, I feel like we kind of have a beat on him, but I don't know as much as I do know, if that makes sense.
well, from I don't know. I think you got to try it.
Uh-huh.
At some point you got to say, okay, like, he's been in there in 7 days. Say he's been in there 3 times or something like that, and say it's in and around, you know, um, early season. It would be more so of like, okay, he's just coming in at gray light, right at the end of the evening or something like that, and he's been in there, 3 out of the 7 days or something like that. At some point, as long as you got the access to be able to get in and out of there pretty clean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to try it. I
Yeah.
mean, because if you don't, I mean, I, I, that's one thing I've learned. I learned a long time ago of like, I want to play. I would want to, either I was young and I want to get super aggressive and just go right in and just screw it all up and just pound the spot for 3 or 4 days, and then the deer completely disappear on me, or you know, or I'd want to play it. Oh, I'm just gonna play it so safe, and I'm just gonna wait. He's still gonna be there come, late October, into, November, and then I'll get him. And then I've done that before, and then all of a sudden that late October comes, and it's like, oh, now he's over there in the neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even have him, and he just transitioned, and that's where he's at. I I think you got to give it a shot. I mean, you got to, and if you screw it up, you screw it up. I mean,
Well,
I
that's
think a
something
lot.
you talk about a lot is not being afraid of failure or don't be afraid of screwing it up.
No, that's you can't be. You have to be willing to live with your actions, so to
Uh-huh.
speak.
Yeah.
If you got to be willing to, take a gamble and go in after the deer, and if you screw it up, you screw it up. You know, and sometimes you can screw it up, and you can give it a couple weeks, and you back off of them, and they're back to doing what they were doing
Well, that's
before.
kind of like the buck you shot last year. You ended up killing him in November, right?
Yeah, I killed him like late November.
Yeah. So you had the opportunity in the beginning and you stuck with it and it still worked out. So don't think the world comes crashing in if you do goof up.
Yeah, and you just got to be willing to take those chances, and just think about your approach. Think about, you know factor all of it in, and these whitetails. I mean, they're an animal. They move instinctively. They're not. There's there's not a thought process, it's like, oh, I know Jake's going to be over there tonight because this is what he's been doing. And
Hmm.
they're not playing something out in their head or whatever. I mean, they're doing things because, yeah, maybe even if they got you once, like, it still doesn't mean that you're completely out of the game. I just wouldn't be in that tree again.
Okay, that's a key piece of advice. Don't if you get nailed, adjust.
For sure. And I've adjusted 50 yards before and killed them,
Hmm.
after being busted. Um, so that's, it kind of goes back to being mobile again. That's um, I mean, I would love to just be lazy and not have to do all that work because, I mean, you become like a professional tree trimmer and tree
Right.
climber,
Right.
and and then you're in the poison ivy and the thorns, and then you get your stand up there, and it's like, the tree's kind of leaning forward a little bit and super uncomfortable up there. Like, there's just so many things, like, when it comes to hanging these sets, and um you just gotta, but the biggest thing is understanding where they're coming from, what your wind is truly doing, um because it's not always just based off of your weather app and what it's doing. I mean, you get to a spot. I mean, I've climbed up in trees, had them set, got up there because that was the wind I was going to hunt the deer on. And once you got up there, it's like, man, this wind is not doing, it's completely doing the opposite up here.
Hmm.
And I've had to shift to, like, say, the other side or whatever in there, and then all of a sudden I found it,
Yeah.
you know. So sometimes it's some trial and error too on learning spots. I mean, I got a couple spots that you would think that were, when walking in, you'd think it was the wrong wind, and you get in there, and I mean, you check it, and you're like, it's it's the wind,
Hmm.
it's but if to look at an app, you would never
Yeah.
go in there and do that. But
For sure. Yeah, I think everyone's ran into that where you're anticipating it to be doing something and then you're there and you're like, oh crap. And I think most people would say, all right, well, I'm already here, I'm set up, this is where I'm gonna be, and then they end up getting in trouble on that sit. And so
yeah,
I think that
you're
happens a lot.
you're better off, depending on the situation. I would be I If it was me, if I got in there and the wind was wrong, as much as it sucks because you just hung that set and trimmed and maybe even trimmed out some stuff, I would jerk it down and slide over to another side or just get out of there for the evening.
Hmm.
I think you're better off doing one of those things, but to stay in there just because you're lazy, and I mean, we're all like that. We're all a little lazy when it comes to this stuff. And I've done it before. I'm like, oh, I'll just ride it out, maybe to change later, whatever. It never does, you know.
All right. Well, hopefully someone listening to this right now, this will be in the back of their mind when it happens because it will happen at some point in the season. I guarantee it.
100%. And it's human nature to do that, you spend all that time jacking around with a tree stand, and you get it in there just right, and you just in
It's
the
this.
wind.
It's just the sunken cost fallacy of I've already put this much effort into it, so I'm going to stick with it. In reality, just cut your losses and do something different.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like the other night I hung this set on that creek crossing over there, and is 95 degrees out, and I went in there to put a camera up earlier, and then when I got in there I was like, "Oh god, this looks so good." And I was like, and I didn't have a stand. And that's the other thing. When you're scouting, you should always have a stand in your back. Well, I didn't have a stand the other day when I was scouting in the middle of the day. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "Well, I'll just come back and hang it when I hunt, right?" And you're so much better off just to have it on your back. and be able to hang it then go home, have fresh clothes on, be clean, and then you, it, then you're not doing what I did the other night. I mean, I was wringing wet, like looked like I jumped into a swimming pool, and I cut the crap out of my forearm. I slipped with my trimming saw and nailed my forearm, and had blood running down my arm, and it was like, what am I doing in here?
That's great. Well, is there anything else you could think of? Any parting piece of advice for someone that wants to have a little more success in the early part of October? I mean, I feel like we covered a lot of important things: access, being the right level of aggressive,
Yep.
thinking where they're at, where they're going to be, and how does that play into you. But anything else you can think of?
No, I think the biggest things early season is, you know, use your binos and spotting scope as much as possible. Do not be completely dependent on trail cameras. I think they're great for inventory. I think you can see some patterns with them. Um, they're one of the greatest tools that's ever came out for hunting, in my opinion. But don't get you know completely dependent on them. Use some, you know, understand what food that your deer like to eat in those areas. Key in on that, and then time your move. Don't just because you got a picture of a big deer, don't just go in on him until the time's right. Till he's you see a little weakness in his armor, and then go in and it's a 1 or 2 time strike, because if you get to the third hunt, it's 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 going to get much harder from there, because he's going to eventually cut your track and know that
Figure
he's
it
being
out.
hunted.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, good luck the rest of your trip here in Kentucky. I hope we get a look back at this when we post it, and you end up connecting with one of the deer you're after. And then also good luck for the rest of the season. Where can people find everything that you have going on?
Pretty much on my Instagram page, which is Mason's Dad 1975. That's pretty much the only place that I really put much of my hunting stuff. And then through Whitetail Addictions, which is on the Lone Wolf Custom Gear YouTube page, and anything Lone Wolf Custom Gear. Been affiliated and doing stuff with them for years, and we are actually testing some new products down here right now
Oh, cool.
that we can't let out of the bag quite yet, but the one I really like, and I think I think everybody's gonna like some of this new stuff that's coming out.
Sweet. Well, appreciate you carving out some time of your day here in between hunts and scouting. So I want to thank you for that. Always a pleasure to catch up, and encourage everyone to
Same.
go follow along with what you have going on.